far today. It's been exhausting coming up with some of the answers to people's questions. Let's see if we can make somebody else feel uncomfortable this morning. Live from Washington, D.C., Congressman Russ Fulcher is with us. I wish there was something going on this week that we could talk about, being sarcastic. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us this morning. The number one thing, of course, as we look forward to this weekend, 12:01 a.m. Sunday morning, if an agreement is not come to between now and then, government will shut down. Can you lay out what is going on right now and why this upcoming shutdown and the bills you are voting on are different from in the past?
Yeah, well, thank you for giving me a chance to talk. It's great to talk with you again. And September is the fiscal mark throughout the course of the year where it's time to reset budget numbers, and that's why every September these types of things come to a head, because everybody disagrees on where the money should go. And especially on the House front, there's a lot of drive to reduce spending when you just hit $33 trillion in debt as a country, and you're being downgraded by the rating agencies and all that. And so everything comes to a head, and then there's always a contingency that just does not want to reduce the spending at all. So that's the bottom line. We're having an argument over what should be cut, how much should be cut. And with the House rules, anyone can do amendments at any time, and so we've been doing hundreds of those. And I think that's a good thing. Frankly, we should have been doing it earlier, but it's a good thing. But in the House, I think that we will have more than likely a stopgap provision to avoid a shutdown. But to be honest, it's not going to align with what the Senate wants to do. And so, Mike and Chris, I don't see a way around at least a short-term shutdown until we get our agreement between the House and Senate. So,
the last time when we had the threat of a shutdown, we had an omnibus bill that you were voting on, right? And that's not the case now, because of rules changes, correct?
Right.
Isn't there's 12 separate bills now that you must go ahead and agree on and vote on independently?
Yes, and that's frankly, that's a really healthy thing. These omnibus bills, as you're aware, it throws everything in one big pot. And the idea behind it is, well, you put enough ingredients in the pot that the majority of people would rather vote for it than against it, right? But at least in my view, that's a really bad way to govern. And I've been an advocate for a single subject for a long time, and that's what we're doing. There's going to be 12 separate appropriations bills coming out of the House. We addressed 4 of them last night, and 3 of them passed. That was Department of Defense, that was Homeland Security, and that was State and Foreign Operations. Those 3 passed. The agricultural appropriation did not pass, and there's a pertinent reason for that applies to Idaho, if I may. I don't think that particular appropriation got any Democrat support, and it got there was a number of Republicans, primarily from New York and the East, that voted against it. That's what funds Forest Service. And that's a huge component of that bill, and it's pertinent to Idaho because we have so much federal land and national forests, and that's a real problem. It's a sticking point for a lot of our colleagues on even our side of the aisle. They don't like funding it, and so that bill failed.
Where do you feel the most significant cut should be made in the budget?
Well, we've set our rules, Chris, and to hold the mandatory spending harmless, so Social Security, Medicare, defense, veterans programs, and disaster relief. Those we've kind of mutually just said, okay, that we just have to fund that, and we have to keep that whole. A lot of people will argue that shouldn't be the case, but that's the agreement at this point, and that means, and that's a huge part of the pie. I don't know the exact percentage, but that's in terms of the overall spending, that's by far the majority. But yet, we've also agreed that we need to get back to the pre-COVID level of overall federal budget. and that is around 1.52 trillion with a T, which means that everything else, other than what I just mentioned, the Social Security, Medicare, defense, veterans, and disaster relief, everything else takes, on average, around a 25%, 30% haircut. And that's painful. That means all the government agencies and, but every single appropriation we sign really is an invoice to our kids and grandkids because the debt is so high. And so a number of us, myself included, feel like, hey, drastic times, drastic measures, we've got to get our fiscal house in order. And therein lies the struggle.
I know this is a dumb question, but I have to ask it. Is there any way possible that when you see a shutdown like this, that you can get, and I know it's difficult to get everybody in Congress to agree on anything, but is there any way possible that you can see, because it's such a bad look that every congressman, every senator all gets paid during a shutdown, but for instance, the military doesn't get a paycheck. The people that are working for you as pages, interns, assistants don't get a paycheck. Any way possible that you would ever think that you would see Congress vote that congressmen and senators don't get paid during a shutdown either?
Yeah, and it's not a stupid question at all. I can't tell you all of the history of it, but I know there's some serious constitutional ramifications that apply to that. It's very difficult for us to, A, increase our pay, B, to eliminate our pay. And that's just as members, but that's not a stupid question at all. We talk about it all the time, and you're right, it's a horrible look. It's not like we're totally unscathed. I mean, a lot of the things that are typically reimbursed, like, for example, travel to and from home and whatnot during a shutdown, we need to front the funds for that and whatnot. But to your point, it's not a stupid question. It's a very high hurdle to make that happen because you have to directly conflict with constitutional guidelines to pull money from members, or at least the compensation. But it's certainly out there, and it's certainly one of those topics. And where I thought you were going with that question was, is there any possible way to avoid the shutdown? And so I was going to take a shot at that too. I don't think so. Unless there was some miracle between Senate and House, and they're in a totally different position than we are on the House front. And I think any way you slice it, there's going to be the shutdown, at least for a short period of time.
I'm going to put you just real quickly on the spot. If a vote was ever to come up on whether or not you would forego your pay during a shutdown, if that was ever brought up for a vote, would you vote for that?
Yeah, I likely so. And like I say, there's a lot of gyrations that have to go to get there because you're talking about a direct constitutional issue. But I think it's only reasonable that we have the same ramifications as others. And by the way, the federal employees that won't, or during the shutdown window that don't get paid, it's not like they never do.
Right.
It's there's a reimbursement that comes when we get things ironed out. But no, I'm not opposed to that, and I think there's probably a lot of us that would also agree to it. And I'm not at all dodging the question, but that's a difficult vote to pull up for any of us.
Do you think Kevin
McCarthy?
McCarthy?
Of the constitutional ramifications.
Do you think Kevin McCarthy should be replaced as Speaker of the House?
I don't. And I know that his popularity is up and down depending on where you are in the country. But Chris, serving here, there's 435 very independent cats in here, and we all have our own ideas. We all have our own type A leadership attitudes, and we all serve slightly different constituencies. And there's a lot of independence, and that's a Speaker of the House has got to be one of the most frustrating jobs on the planet. And so no, I think Kevin's doing as well as any one person can. And we've talked about it. I mean, and this is the honest to God's truth. If he were vacated, there's not a long list of people who would sign up to want to try to do that. It's not like there's a long waiting line of logical people, and honestly, I don't know of any other member that has the votes to replace him. And so, I'm not saying there won't be at least maybe a motion to do that, but I don't see it likely. And changing that role, changing the person in that role, I don't think necessarily is going to change the other issues we're going through.
We're talking with Congressman Russ Fulcher live from Washington, D.C. this morning. Need to take a break. When we come back, I want to delve a little bit more into the negotiations because I think we're all in agreement also that I don't see the shutdown being averted before Sunday. But I want to get into some of the specifics of some of the agreements being discussed on the Republican side of the aisle when we come back. More with Congressman Russ Fulcher next. 52, we're talking with Congressman Russ Fulcher live from Washington, D.C. Still hitting on the possible shutdown. You think it's happening, Chris? Now, are you still at just 100%, Chris, or have that moved above 100%?
It might be down to 99 now that we've been talking to the congressman.
So, Congressman, I mean, part of this is you have to get to the point where you can even negotiate, with Democrats and Republicans, and then the House and the Senate. And so far, it doesn't seem to be that there's an agreement between the Republicans. And I say this because I don't know if you got to be in the meeting yesterday or if you heard about this, but apparently there was another shouting match between Matt Gaetz and Kevin McCarthy yesterday. Were you a part of that?
I was not in that particular meeting, but I've been in multiples that were similar. So,
where are the Republicans? Where can't they agree as of right now to even get to the point where they can start to make negotiations with the Democrats?
Well, first of all, it's close. It's not nearly as far as it was. So the overall level of the spending cuts, but has been one issue. But I think that's, for the most part, that's been ironed out. We've pretty much universally agreed that we hit that 1.52, go back to that 1.52 number. The other one has been Ukraine funding, and we've stripped that out. If you were following last night, we stripped that out and we voted on that independently as a separate issue, and so that has been hurdled. And those were the two biggest ones. The other one is more semantics, and it's whether to CR or not CR, which is really, in my view, not a real legitimate discussion. A CR or continuing resolution is a stopgap measure that allows things to keep going until you iron things out. To me, that's nothing more than a tool, and a tool can be used for good things or bad things. And my objective, and I think the majority of most of the House members, is we've got to appropriate less. We need to spend less and be smarter about how we go about spending taxpayer money. And I'm willing to do that today, and I'm willing to do that in 14 days or whatever that is. And so that CR is nothing more than a tool. And if you can leverage your position with that tool, then you do it. And if you don't, you don't. At least that's my view. And I think we're really close on that too. Where the bigger issue comes up is with the Senate. In the House, we have anchored all of our negotiations around H.R. 2, which is a border security issue. The Senate has chosen not to address that at all. They've anchored their position around the FAA or the Federal Aviation bill. And so they've chosen not to address border security. We are saying that's starter number one. Before we go anything further, before we have any money discussions or anything, we've got to agree that we're going to secure the border. So that's where the sparks are going to begin to fly. The other thing is the Senate has, in their stopgap, they've actually increased funding, and that's going the wrong way, too, for us. So there's where the real impasse is going to be.
How did you feel the first day of the impeachment inquiry went yesterday?
From what I could tell, it was pretty much as predicted. The Speaker has made it clear, and Congressman Jordan and Comer have made it clear this is an inquiry to see if there's grounds to move forward after that. Plus, it gives them the ability to ask some really tough questions about Hunter Biden and how he may be connected with his dad. It's going to be a long, ugly process, but one, quite frankly, that needs to have some light shown on it. So I think it's going about as expected.
We got about a minute here left. Have you personally seen any evidence so far that would directly link Hunter Biden and receiving money to President Joe Biden? Has there been any direct link?
Seen the bank account transfers and to Biden family members, and so I don't know if that actually has funneled its way to Joe, but it's highly suspect just because his personal net worth has jumped dramatically in recent years. But there's these funds that have gone to his family. One makes a statement, it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, all that. It certainly looks that way. But there's more work to be done before you take the step of impeachment, and I think that's what's underway. And I think that this probably will go to the next level, but
right.
Got to go through the process.
Congressman Russ Fulcher, thanks for taking a little time with us this morning. We'll let you get back to work, and hopefully we'll have good news over the weekend, and the government will not shut down. Thanks again for being with us this morning.
We're working at it. Hey, thank you.